Let's talk about the science behind the effectiveness or influence of crystals. I love crystals. I have so many crystals. I'm a total crystal bunny. And is that a Herkimer diamond?
No, it's a citrine, actually.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Citrine.
This is
One of my
beautiful.
favourite pieces.
Very nice. Tell us about that.
Right, so well, I wrote a chapter on crystals. It turned out it was the largest chapter of the book. Actually, I was surprised at how much there was to say from a scientific perspective. Now, there hasn't been clinical trials on crystals, but you don't really have to. There's a lot that science can say. I mean, and there's actually 3 ways that I wrote that crystals can have an impact. The first way is actually harnessed by the Buddhist practice of Dzogchen. So Dzogchen is a teaching in Buddhism where they use a clear quartz crystal, and what the crystal serves as is what's called a mental representation. Now, we know in cognitive psychology that a mental representation is just something that represents, that stands for something else. So the clarity of the crystal represents, or it stands for, if you like, the clear state of mind or the clear state of being that the practitioner wishes to attain. And for thousands of years, that has helped umpteen Buddhist practitioners to help to attain a clearer state of being. So it's the clarity of the crystal. So when we work with crystals, if you're using a clear crystal, then because the clarity of the crystal also for a person who's meditating with a crystal, it's how I use crystals. The clarity for me represents, it stands for a clear state of mind. And so it's almost as I hold it in my hands and look at it, it's a constant reminder. And what a mental representation does is it helps you to move towards it, because that's how the brain works, through mental representations. It's why visualization of the piano study, it's why what you're visualizing isn't, you're not actually playing the piano keys, but you have a mental representation in your mind that's causing neurological change in your brain. So when you have a mental representation, it's why some cognitive psychologists call the brain a symbol operating system. Because when you have a mental representation of something, it causes a change in your brain and in your body. In fact, if you close your eyes and create a mental representation of a biting into a lemon, at least 50% of the population will salivate.
Yeah.
Now, you're not biting a lemon, you're just creating a mental representation of it. And so what I argued in the book, the first way that crystals impact us is having a mental representation of clarity can help you generate a clearer state of mind or a clearer state of being, depending upon what your focus is at the time. Whether your mental representation is to be a clearer channel, or whether your mental representation is to use it to be a clearer, have a clearer state of mind kind of thing. The second way I argued that crystals impact us is the colours, because we know from colour psychology that colour impacts us in a multitude of different ways. In fact, even neurologically. In fact, one of my favourite colour studies is volunteers were given a cherry flavoured drink, but the scientists coloured it lime green. So they put a little dye in it.
Yeah.
Do you know 37% of people couldn't taste cherry at all?
Wow.
And they swore that what they were drinking was lemon or lime flavoured. In other words, the brain processed the flavour based on what it should be, given its colour, rather than what it actually is. So what I argued is, just like we know in colour psychology, if I wear, a particular colour one day because the colour helps me, because we know from colour psychology that blue, for example, can be a calming colour, depending if it's a lighter shade of blue, or it can also be a colour that makes you feel confident if you're a male. And greens are more kind of natural, organic kind of things. Yellows can make you feel cheerful. We know that from life itself, but colour psychology also tells us these. So I argued that the colour of crystals, depending on how we're using them, can also elicit some behavioural and emotional changes, just like the way marketers, for example, use colour to elicit behavioural changes.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah. And the third, I know that this is a huge chapter in your book. And then number 3, you have a number 3.
Number 3. Now, I argued, and there is some beginnings of research in this kind of field, but I argued that the magnetic properties of crystals also have an effect. So quartz crystal, it has a property that's known as diamagnetic. Now, what that means is if something is diamagnetic, it means that it diverts the Earth's magnetic field. Well, here's a good wee analogy. If I was standing outside and it was pouring with rain, I could put an umbrella up. And what the umbrella would do is it would divert the path of the rain off of me, and it would go round the umbrella, and it would dump it all onto someone, unfortunate soul standing beside me, who would now get twice as wet because they would get my share of rain.
Right.
So something that is diamagnetic, what it does is it's not rain it's diverting, it's the Earth's magnetic field. So as the Earth's magnetic field's coming round it, it's like an umbrella, and it pushes the Earth's magnetic field to the side. So anything a lot close to a crystal gets much more of the Earth's magnetic field than the inside of the crystal itself. Whereas some crystals are paramagnetic, and what that means is it pulls the Earth's magnetic field into it like a funnel, and it deprives of it on the outside. So the question I posed was, do these little fluctuations in the intensity of the Earth's magnetic field, do they actually matter? Well, there's been a heck of a lot of research recently on the impact of the Earth's magnetic field on plants, and it's actually called plant magnetoreception. The reason for the interest is NASA is looking seriously at, could we grow crops on Mars or even on the moon? Could we grow crops on a space station? Now, there's different magnetic field strengths in these places, so they want to study what's the impact of increasing or decreasing the Earth's magnetic field. Will that make plants grow faster or slower? And it turns out that like an increase, for example, that you would get from a diamagnetic substance, some types of plants will grow faster. Other types of plants will grow slower. Some will end up with more chlorophyll, more green, and others will end up with less. And it depends on the genetics of the plant. But there's no question, recent research is now suggesting that diamagnetic substances in soils are actually impacting a gene that affects how much iron is taken up by the roots of a plant, which is what then affects the greenness of it through the chlorophyll. So scientists are now looking at diamagnetic substances in soils and saying, we think they're actually affecting the growth rate of plants. Now, here is a diamagnetic substance, a quartz crystal. Now, yes, there's not been any scientific studies on what happens when you hold a crystal. And I pointed that out in the book, but what I did say is I don't think we can rule it out. I don't know how strong the effect is, but I think there probably is some effect from a diamagnetic substance in close proximity to the body for a period of time. I don't know how much, but I'm just, from science, I think something is there.
Okay, if you like this podcast and you want to see more, just click over here and you'll get to see more clips from this interview. If you just want to listen, well, if you click there, you'll listen to the entire interview, available to you on any one of your favorite podcast channels.